Welcome to our coverage of the Noor Salman trial right here on clickorlando.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Austin. Opening statements begin today in federal court. Among those in the courtroom, Salman's family from California and more than a dozen victims, survivors of the Pulse attack. One of the first people to take the stand was Orlando officer Adam Gruler, who was working security the night of the attack. Gruler tells the jury what he saw and thought during the attack, saying time froze and that at one time thought it was a club shooting and with one person targeting another. Later goes on describing the horror of the people killed. Christine Leinenen, who lost her son in Pulse, spoke to us about the officer's actions, saying he didn't do enough.
He kept hearing the shooting, that it was an active shooter, and that he recognized what active shooter protocol was in his department, but yet he called for a perimeter even though he heard shots before and after him calling for that perimeter. Why would he? What is he, old school? What is this, 1985? What is this, pre-assault weapon America? That's when you used to set up perimeters. Today, you can't set up a perimeter. You have to keep shooting till you shoot the shooter.
Orlando police responded to the officer's action, saying, quote, upon hearing the first shots fired by the suspect, the OPD detective, who was working his extra duty security detail at Pulse, determined rapid intervention was necessary and quickly positioned himself to engage the suspect. And within just the last hour, one of Salman's attorneys spoke to our cameras about the trial today.
Well, I think today just shows you why it's so important that we have a presumption of innocence in this country, and we have our constitutional protections.
Let's get you out to News 6 investigator Mike DeForest. He's been out there all day, and he has the latest. Mike?
Hey, Matt, so much went on today from both sides presenting their opening statements to, I think, about 7 different witnesses, ranging from police officers to a terrorism expert to a couple of the victims who survived the Pulse nightclub attack. Just want to give you a quick little preview or a little rundown of what happened during opening statements. When prosecutors were up there, they were very firm in their presentation, saying that none of the victims in the Pulse nightclub attack, the FBI, Orange County Sheriff, Orlando Police, nobody knew that attack was coming. But prosecutor James Mandolfo says that no one knew except Omar Mateen and his wife, Noor Salman. The prosecution then outlined some of the more bizarre things that they allege Noor Salman did when the FBI began questioning them, such as one of the first things she said when a police officer showed up at her house is that Omar Mateen likes America and he likes homosexuals. But the prosecution claims that at that point, nobody had told her that her husband had attacked a gay nightclub. And then the prosecution talked about how she and her husband would case certain places where they were potentially planning an attack. An entertainment complex in West Palm Beach. They say they're going to show a surveillance photo that shows Omar Mateen, his wife Noor Salman, and their 3-year-old child at a gas station at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the prosecution just hitting home. This couple and their son were out casing terrorism targets in the middle of the night. They talk about her extravagant spending in the days leading up to the Pulse nightclub attack and the suggestion that she knew what was coming and helped aid in that. Joining us right now, defense attorney Mark O'Mara. I just gave some of the highlights. They crammed a lot in there, but from what you've been kind of able to follow, your thoughts on how this opening statement went for the prosecution?
It was brisk, it was to the point, and it does exactly what they have to do, which is they have to start convincing this jury that she's guilty, and the way they're going to do that is show all the little nuances, all the little bricks that they want to put in their wall to try and show that she had to know what was going on, and by knowing what was going on, she's as guilty as he was.
We learned a lot of new things about the overall Pulse nightclub attack. For example, I think it was the first time we ever heard that it was Omar Mateen's assault rifle actually jammed, and that's why he retreated to the bathroom. We learned in kind of an interesting nugget that they're claiming that Noor Salman tried to set up a cover story for her husband by claiming that he was out with his friend Nemo, and that's what Omar Mateen told his mom. I'm out with my buddy Nemo. Apparently, Omar Mateen's mom and Nemo's mom bumped into each other at a restaurant that night, and that kind of exposed this cover story as being a lie. I want to transition really quick into what the defense presented during their opening statements. It was Linda Moreno and she came across a very, I don't want to say the word motherly, but it was a very soft presentation, basically saying, and she said, Noor Salman is not a monster, she's a mother, and proceeded to paint Noor Salman as this woman with a low IQ who was very simple. And just this technique, the defense acknowledged, they conceded that Omar Mateen was the one who committed this attack. They just insist Noor Salman knew nothing about it.
A couple things that the defense has to do, as we talked about before. They have to humanize their client to this jury. They have to make her a human being, and the best way to do that is to make her a mother. And then the other thing they need to do, similar to that, is they have to separate her from Mateen. Calling him a monster is perfect for them. The monster-mother dichotomy is the best way to do that, because if they're going to gain an acquittal for Miss Salman, they're going to do it because that jury feels for her, believes in her, and understands that she may not have had to do with Mateen the way the prosecution is saying.
And during the defense's opening statements, it's too numerous to go through right now, but for each kind of suspicious point that the prosecution brought up, the defense would try to give an honest explanation. For example, what the prosecution claims was Mateen and his wife casing downtown Disney, casing this entertainment complex in West Palm Beach. The defense just simply painted as a family outing, and that they brought their 3-year-old son with them.
Well, again, you know, the government's got to try and show guilt from any way that they can. But let's face it, let's look at the example of 2 o'clock in the morning at the West Palm Beach area. How does that show casing a joint? There's no evidence to support that. There quite honestly could be just a couple, according to what Noor Salman was looking at, a couple and their child out at 2 o'clock in the morning. Was the child up because the child couldn't sleep? Whatever. What the government's trying to do is, by innuendo, it seems, suggest this type of guilt. That's not going to convince this jury. They're going to have to be able to tie things together better.
And Prosecutor James Mandolfo said right off the bat, no single piece of evidence that they're going to present to this jury is going to convince them beyond a reasonable doubt that Noor Salman helped her husband. But what he says is that it's the cumulative effect, that when you see all this together, he says there's going to be no other verdict that they'll be able to come up with but guilty.
But for the confession statement that we haven't heard yet, but we've heard about, there is no evidence. This is a circumstantial evidence case once you move the statement off to the side. And of course, the prosecution knows the defense is going to go after that statement for a number of reasons. One, using an interrogation expert to suggest how easy it is to interrogate somebody who's not particularly intelligent. And also the fact that for whatever reason, and you know this is a concern of mine, the FBI decided not to record that so that this jury could have seen it and or heard her exact words, not the FBI interpretation of it or their writings of it.
And during opening statements, the defense really hammered home, why didn't they record this? Surely the officers had a camera phone in their pockets.
We all do.
I want to shift gears just a little bit now to some of the first witnesses that we saw here today. Among the first was a woman who survived the Pulse nightclub attack, said that she was basically trapped in the women's restroom, and that at one point a man crawled in wounded and died in her lap. And she described how after he died, she pulled his dead body on top of her and then played dead herself in hopes that she wouldn't get shot. And then she testified about how she said at this point she thought she was going to die and that she didn't feel it was worth even calling 911, so she called her mother instead. In this by bringing this witness in, they did allow for a 911 call from another victim. They did allow for an audio recording, we'll explain, but just the importance of the prosecution bringing a survivor on so early.
Well, you know, the prosecution's got to lay out exactly what happened that night, and they're going to be given leeway by the judge to do so. And we all know this is a tragedy, but at a certain point you have to ask yourself, what is the true relevance of having a survivor victim in that location testify to this jury? There really isn't much more than the emotions of the moment, which we understand and the government has the right to talk about. But once the balance goes into emotions just for the point of being emotional, then it's inappropriate.
Now, I don't know how much that the prosecution's intentionally trying to bring those jurors into Pulse nightclub, but it sure felt like that because while this survivor was on the witness stand, they introduced an audio recording that was made by one of her friends who was in there, recorded on his cell phone, and it basically recorded while Omar Mateen was held up in this bathroom with them. It was mostly silent. It was almost eerie how silent it was. Every now and then that silence was broken by cell phones, and you knew that it was victims' families or friends calling to check on them. You hear the phone ring, 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 and then it would stop. But it was mostly quiet. You hear a little bit of mumbling. You'd hear some sniffles. And then bang, 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 bang. And you heard Omar Mateen opening fire with, at that point, was his handgun. And it just, I don't know what message they were trying to convey to the jury other than putting them in that terrifying restroom.
Well, and again, the government's going to be given some leeway in doing that. But this jury is going to be told that they are not to consider emotions when they think this case through and when they make their verdict. They're not supposed to look at things and feel sympathetic or biased against anybody. So within that context, you have to question how far Judge Byron is going to let the government go with what seems to be emotion-packed information, but not having a great deal of relevance.
I do want to point out, though, that some of the relevance I think they did try to bring out in that was, it was both in the audio recording and in the victim's statement, was that she heard Omar Mateen talking in the background, making this fake phone call to these so-called co-conspirators on the outside, suggesting that there were more than one person involved in this attack. The FBI now says that wasn't true, but it did appear that at least may have been the legitimate groundwork that they were laying with calling these witnesses, and that...
Absolutely true, and that does explain the police presence and the police reaction. I don't know what that gives the jury as far as insight on Noor Salman's decisions and actions and guilt.
Well, there was so much going on in court today. We need to wrap this up. Attorney Mark O'Mara, thank you so much. You're going to be with us again throughout the rest of the week, kind of helping us analyze everything that's going on down here. We can tell you right now, we've been posting updates all day on our website, clickorlando.com. We've got a special Twitter feed. You can see it embedded right in there, where we'll run out of the courtroom for a little bit, give some updates. So there was a lot going on. This is a big, important trial to the community of Central Florida here, and we want to bring as much coverage as we can. So we're going to send it back to you, Matt, and we'll be back out here tomorrow.
Mike and Mark, thank you guys very much. Our coverage of this trial continues online tonight. We have a special page detailing everything that happened today, and it was a lot, on clickorlando.com/Noor Salman tab. Don't forget to follow the up-to-the-minute details on Twitter. It's twitter.com/News6Pulse Trial. Join us tomorrow morning for another discussion. Our coverage begins at 8:30 right here on clickorlando.com. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Matt Austin.